Thanks for coming to this session about the creative opportunities afforded to artists in a connected world. Digital is often used as a broadcast media, everything from Flickr online to recording concerts on YouTube. But there's obviously huge opportunities to use digital as a creative medium in itself. Everything from works which use the fabric of the web to interactive installations and so forth. So we've got an amazing panel for you this afternoon. And the purpose of this session is to talk to 3 artists and 1 director about the creative opportunities afforded to the web in their practice. So I'm just going to go through and introduce your panel. Katherine Araniello is a London-based performance and video artist and uses subversive humour to expose hypocrisy in response to contemporary themes concerning disability and social awareness. Katherine's art transforms the ordinarily mundane realities of disability into deadpan and humorous short sketches. Katherine uses improvisation and interaction to create unpredictable, thought-provoking situations from large productions to DIY punk ethics. And Katherine very recently did a show as part of the Unlimited Festival at Southbank Centre called The Dinner Party. Rachel Rayns is an artist and maker based in Norfolk. She's currently the artist in residence at Raspberry Pi and founder of Soup Lab, a not-for-profit art organisation which focuses on how new and old technologies can work together. Ruth Catlow is an artist who works with emancipatory network cultures, practices and poetics. She is co-founder and artistic director with Mark Garrett of Furtherfield for Arts, Technology and Social Change. And Furtherfield's online hub provides a forum for exchange and critical review and public exhibition and lab ventures in the heart of Finsbury Park in London. Sandeep Mahal, after 7 years at the Reading Agency, is just taking up the new directorship of The Space, which is the BBC and Arts Council's venture for the development of digital art. So just for the first standard panel kind of format, we'll have 5 minutes from each of the panellists, and then we'll have a wider discussion about the topics. So Katherine, I wonder if you would introduce yourself a bit further and talk about the dinner party and how you've recently used the web in your creative practice.
Okay, thanks. Well, I haven't recently started using the web. I actually used it years ago when I realised that it was a means to a platform of which I could put my work out there so that people would have access to it irrespective of where they were or their situation. And so I first used YouTube in around 2004, where I uploaded a blog, which was an art piece, unbeknown to the people that viewed it, because I called it Assisted Suicide on Valentine's Day. And the reason I called it was because I uploaded it on the 14th of February. And it was a satirical piece that was there to give a very alternative, different representation of disabled people, because at that time, as it is still prevalent today, and there's lots of issues around, there's lots of media coverage on people wanting to end their lives. So for me, that was a way to address this issue, but in a very different way that actually got people to think about an alternative way of thinking about that. So that was the first time. And then up until date, I counted how many pieces of work that I've uploaded onto YouTube, and it's about 60 videos. So I think that I'm a very sort of big user of YouTube and all social media. And then in September, oh yes, and another, I wanted to mention that in 2013, I was invited to exhibit some work to a virtual gallery, which was in Canada, and I never really sort of thought about presenting work in another country, because it's actually difficult for me to move around. So this opportunity to actually have a virtual gallery which I could make a piece of work and then have it exhibited was really good. And that was put together by the Common Pulse, and it was a disability festival. And I think the whole idea was that it was accessible to anyone that had good internet connection. And then just going back to this September, as James said, I received unlimited funding, and the original concept was to put on one performance, and through the process and communication and thinking about how to extend that live element so that it wasn't. So I wanted to think about the touring aspect of the work and how it would be possible to present the performance somewhere else if I was invited to say do it in Brazil or New York. And so through exploration and research, we discovered specialist companies, audiovisual companies that are experts in making things happen that even I wasn't aware was possible. So to just get to the point, what we did is we had the performance going on in the Purcell rooms here, and simultaneously we had the same performance happening at Toynbee Studios in London. So we used it as a bit of an experimental platform, and through technology, I believe that the live element of the performance was maintained and it wasn't diluted. So there was lots of things to think about in terms of, how do you maintain the live element through digital media, and how do you keep the excitement of a live performance still happening when you're not physically present. So is that enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Rachel, would you speak a little bit about being artist in residence at Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start where I came from because it'll make more sense as to why I'm here. So when I was at university, I was studying fine art, and I was really, really interested in 16mm filmmaking, like exclusively. Was not interested in digital at all. And I was really interested in developing your own film. So you'd get a bucket and a stick, and you would develop your own film in the chemicals and things. And I was really interested in the London cooperative movement and things. And then I got a reputation for myself, basically, for being a girl that would go around in my van and pick up equipment from galleries, from photographic studios going digital. And I accidentally started the second largest pre-digital photographic company on eBay, and did very well and got really loads of interesting cameras, and had very understanding parents that would let me have all this equipment in one of their barns. And then I graduated and I got home and they said I needed to get this stuff out. And I decided that rather than doing an unpaid internship in London and paying for trains, I would give it a bash, as I have no dependents and it was the only time I could possibly do it, to rent out a space in my hometown, Norwich, and start a gallery and start a motion picture lab. And the way I did it was downstairs I had my gallery space, and then I had my darkroom and my motion picture lab with all my equipment in it, and I had a cooperative working space upstairs. And this was all kind of ticking over nicely, and I ended up having lots of people renting desks upstairs. And these guys were playing with these little bleepy things that I wasn't that interested in. And I carried on going, running the stuff downstairs, was doing quite well, running workshops kind of at the Tate Modern and things like that. Brighton, quite a lot of Brighton things for some reason, in kind of drawing on film workshops, pretty much as analogue as you could get. And I ended up sitting and having more and more conversations with these guys that turned out to be playing with Arduinos. And it got to year 2 and I hadn't made anything. And I don't know if any of you have been to art school, but you come out of art school and I felt drained and like I didn't have anything creative left to give. So it took me 2 years, and then I suddenly became kind of fidgety creatively and said I needed to make something again. And I needed it to be something different. So I decided I would conquer this whole digital malarkey. So I got myself an Arduino, and I was really interested. I've always been kind of in the organic versus the digital. So I thought, right, I'll make a gardening system. I quite like the idea of that, a robot controlling something living. I wanted something that was like a random input, and I felt like kind of an animal or a small child was immoral, so I'd go for a plant instead. So I started off with this. And I decided that wasn't creative enough, I guess. I kind of conquered it, and it was living, and it was fine, and it was kind of getting all the data, and that was okay. But I decided that wasn't enough. So I wanted to make it an art, basically. And I decided that my robot was going to be in a romantic relationship with its garden. And as a result, it was going to boast about it on social media when its relationship was going well, and it was going to have a crisis when it wasn't going well and the data was all off, and it would need help from outside. It would need crowdsourced kind of help. And then that was the beginning of the Zoe Star project. And I was on an ideas lab for metal culture when I kind of got introduced to this and was working on it, and they kind of gave me the confidence to kind of go with this. And I came across Raspberry Pi in my free AM searching online for the equipment I needed. And I found out they were based in Cambridge, which is only about an hour down the road from Norwich. And I decided I needed to talk to them. I looked around and they didn't have anything really creative going on at that point. They certainly didn't have anyone on staff who was creative. So they had a design award nominated from the Design Museum, and they were looking for work to kind of display in their slot. And I said, here's Zoe, here's what she does. And I got an email from them saying, hey, we haven't seen anything like this before, and you're a girl. Would you do a blog post? Which I still haven't done. And I said, yeah, great, but can I meet you? Because I'd really like to discuss what Raspberry Pi is doing creatively. So I went down and chatted with them and came away being their artist in residence. So I was there for a year doing my artist in residency, which involved lots and lots of going around tech conferences, being the creative one at the end of the conference that would talk about art and creativity after all of the programming presentations. And I have been doing this, and it's been great, actually, and kind of gently kind of hacking through the kind of very tech male community into something that actually can be more creative. And the more I was going to these things, the more confident I was getting with me not having to be put off by the fact that I didn't understand what database this guy was talking about, but actually I really had something to give within this community. And actually what I was saying, what happened was I'd be in a whole kind of streams of presentations and everyone would come up and speak to me afterwards, because I was the one that was actually displaying content and kind of social issues and people issues in my talk, rather than just kind of reading out a manual again and again. So I've been doing that for a year, and then I've decided really I need to, well, that year kind of got me to figure out what my role was, and I pitched the Raspberry Pi, and I'm now the creative producer there permanently, because I decided there was definitely room for something to be there, and managed to convince them of that. So now my scope is cross-curricular within the Raspberry Pi. Actually, does everyone know the Raspberry Pi? I should have started with that. So can we... Okay, well, the Raspberry Pi is like a credit card-sized computer, and initially it was aimed at education for kids between 4 and 18, and it was to enhance computing education, and it came from Cambridge University because they weren't getting enough A-level graduates who were skilled enough in computer education for them, and they only thought they were going to sell like 100,000 of them, and we've now sold 4 million. And that's because the maker community went, actually, this is great, it's really cheap, it's like £25, you can do all kinds of stuff on it. When I first encountered it, I was really interested because you can play high-definition video on it. And I thought, right, that's the end of me having to hide a mini-Mac inside of a plinth just to play a DVD. That was really interesting for me. And I thought there's all kinds of applications. And as soon as there's a low-cost technology, it's always interesting for artists as well. So anyway, that's the kind of background of them. But they are still focusing on computer education, but my scope now is cross-curricular. So I'm interested in how it can be used in art lessons, in music lessons, in tech lessons, but also kind of history, geography, anything really, and producing the resources that teachers need and the confidence, hopefully, for them to actually deliver that. But my heart is still in cultural organisations, and I think that actually learning departments on the whole are some of the most interesting ways of getting into organisations. They tend to be kind of the back door into getting a cultural organisation to perhaps explore new things. So my mission at the moment is to build digital competence within those organisations. So the learning department should feel comfortable delivering digital workshops to kids, because if they can feel digitally competent with kids, actually it's an excuse for them to learn and adults to learn from all the way up, kind of. So I want these cultural organisations to commission new digital work, to be displaying it on a regular basis, so young people can go to their regional organisation rather than having to travel into London and see new digital work and be inspired, and not necessarily turn out to be a computer scientist, but actually just someone who uses digital in their creative or their social or any kind of interaction, really. I just think it's really important we have these discussions with young people and with adults as well, obviously, because it's a whole part of all our lives now, not just computer scientists.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah. Ruth, please speak about Furtherfield, the art gallery that you run in North London with Mark Garrett.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm an artist, and I'm co-founder and co-director of Furtherfield. We're an organisation that's been running since the mid-90s, and we're a kind of community and organisation for arts, technology and social change. I'm going to do a little bit of a timeline, as Rachel did, just because it does help make sense of why we ended up doing what we do. I started out as a sculptor, and the other co-founder of Furtherfield was a painter, and then had a strong background also in pirate radio and early bulletin boards, so kind of pre-web internet communications. And we were both working, somewhat involved in the running of a studio out in the East End of London. And we saw, as kind of Brit art took hold in London, we saw this shift in the kind of culture of artists from a kind of more open and discursive interest in how art related to audiences and the things that were important to most people, to a much more kind of sensation and star focus. So Brit Art, sponsored by Saatchi & Saatchi, mega marketing company who'd got Thatcher into power. So it has a whole kind of set of cultures associated with it, but particularly the kind of star system that it was promoting. And at the same time, Mark and I both encountered Backspace, which was really early, one of the first cyber cafes in London, based on Clink Street near the London Dungeons. And this was, it was a very open space, and it continues to be an inspiration to us. So it was an open space. They had bandwidth when 512 megs was really, really broad bandwidth. And cast off computers from Lateral, advertising company that had made quite a lot of money from advertising. And so these were spare computers with some hacked software and high bandwidth, and it was open to artists, designers, tramps, business people, philosophers, students, and basically the remit was come in and find out what's interesting about the net. Why is this an interesting space? And so a couple of things happened. I encountered my first artwork on the internet, which was an image this kind of size. Okay, I'm going analogue for you, this kind of size. Grayscale that took about 30 seconds to download, and I thought it was the most boring thing I'd ever seen. And it was from the 12-hour JPEG project by Brad Brace, which is still going. And then someone suggested that it was important, and I was just thinking, why is this interesting? I don't understand. And I went back and had another look at it. The next day, and it was another grayscale image, and it was abstract, and I thought I could see the corner of an elephant ear on it. And then I kind of started playing with it over the next few weeks, and I realised that if I went there at 8:29 a.m, there was one image, and if I went there at 8:31 a.m, there was another image, and then that would stay for another 12 hours. And I started to realise that there was this pulse of images coming across the net to the same place every time. Was it a human being? Was it a machine? What was the relationship between one image and the next? Sometimes they were images of a child holding a rose, and sometimes they were completely abstract. And I suddenly had a sense that this was a net. It was quite a mysterious place. We didn't know where the artist was and what kind of collaboration it was between a human being and machine. Cut a long story short, we were really aggravated by the way we felt Brit Art was closing down the conversations and the role of art that kind of attracted us to this practice. And so we started making really ugly web pages. The web pages were ugly, but the art was really interesting, and it was about interesting stuff. And then putting it online, we taught ourselves how to do that, and then making contact through mailing lists in Eastern Europe, South America, North America, Australia, and suddenly found ourselves in the middle of a networked conversation with artists, techies, and activists who were building the web together, essentially, and working out what this space was. So I skipped 15 years, and now we run a public gallery in the heart of Finsbury Park, where we show three exhibitions a year of work by artists, techies, activists, some hybrid form of those people. We have 3 strands of work that we're returning to at the moment, and we're just starting to change these, but they have been Being Social, which looks at how our social relations are changed by new ideas of networks. Invisible Forces, which is about how power moves through networks, which becomes ever more crucial for us to kind of understand how power is moving through networks, through finance and politics and the circulation of weapons and information, all that kind of stuff. And then Free, Open and Wild, which is the connection between cultures of collaborative production on the net, so the software production, but also connections with environmental questions. if that sounds a bit of a stretch, then you just need to go and have a look, because it really makes a lot of sense. Now, is this image on the screen?
I believe we can pull that.
An orange image.
It is indeed.
I'm going to talk about this image for 1 minute and then I'll shut up.
That's fine.
Okay, so this image, this is a graphic we made for a project in 2006, and we didn't realise at the time, but it was the start of a campaign, which is our DIWO campaign. So don't just do it yourself, do it with others. And it was a kind of progression from a sense of subversion and autonomy on the net, where people were working out how to do stuff and share important things and ideas with each other, to an understanding that as artists in a networked environment, really what mattered was who you worked with, how you worked with, and what was important to you as a kind of, what was important to you together. And it really changed our sense of what it meant to be an artist, a network. So the network you see here is a distributed network. So the web is some combination of this and a scale-free network. So this means that many things can be connected to many things at the same time, but they can also be connected across great distances, whether that's geographic or social. And in this image, you'll see tools, connections, securities, crafts, symbols, emotions. You'll see a talking dildo, which is our nod to the role that porn has played in the development of the web, but also to the role of kind of our nervous systems and our bodies. You'll also see the hysteric down in the middle, bottom right, and someone who I like to think of as the artist philosopher, who in my mind is Namjoon Paik, who is one of the founders of kind of global communication arts. And the reason I put this image up for us to ponder is because I think networks really change the way art can ever be again, because it puts artists, audiences, and the art object right in the middle of a network. So it is not only a channel for distribution and circulation, but it's also the place where you make it. It's the place where you critique and review it. And it enables you to collaborate across all these kind of categories of things with many other types of things, tools and beings.
Well, just to that point, actually, Ruth, about digital as a kind of distribution versus digital as a place to make things. Sandeep, in view of the space, I mean, does digital still mean broadcast media, or is it more than that nowadays?
It's more than that now. Hello, everyone.
Sorry,
it's okay. I'm Sandeep, and as you've heard, I'm not an artist. But for me, the opportunity to dream about what artists can make, to move, to inspire, and challenge us in this connected world today is just truly astonishing. And I feel really honoured to play a part in that process, to discover, to nurture and champion great artists and their great work. So I'm the newly appointed director of the Space, and the Space is an ambitious online platform for artists to create something truly remarkable, and we're sharing their experiments freely as it happens with audiences from around the world. We launched in June, and we are supported by the Arts Council and the BBC. And so we're really just starting to imagine what we can do, creating and distributing great work, alongside trying new things and really supporting digital innovation too. I just want to share with you very quickly just some of our highlights since we've launched. We commissioned a project, a play that was performed in Google Hangouts with Lift and artist Elastic Future, and we kind of consider them to be like the astronauts of digital theatre. They're truly amazing. A first concert integrating drones with Velvet Underground's John Cale and architect Liam Young. This took place at the Barbican just a couple of weeks ago. It was an insanely beautiful and weird and mesmerising experience. We staged Hack the Space at the Tate in the Turbine Hall, and I'm delighted to see some of the hackers that were there are here today too. And what they did were they hacked into data sets, and we actually got to see what they created from that data. We saw for the first time Marina Abramovich's performance artwork digitized. And in an exciting new collaboration with BBC Writers' Room, we launched the Space Prize. It's a new award for digital innovation in theatre. And our inaugural project winner is National Theatre Wales for their project called Border Games. It's integrating live theatre and online gaming around this idea of, it's quite controversial actually, illegal immigrants. It's really cool, and do check it out. There's going to be an announcement about it next week. And finally, we're excited to see the first project from our series of art commissioned with Tim Berners-Lee's Open Data Institute, launching on the 6th of October at the TED conference in Rio with artist Julie Freeman. So that just gives you a very tiny and very quick snapshot. And we've got, 3 years to make it a success. And central to that success is the development of an audience for digital art. For us, I think we want more people having more cultural experiences of digital art online. And like many things in the digital space, I think there isn't a complete definition of digital art, and we were talking about this earlier, but we know it's a big thing of the 21st century, and we're on this journey to find out what is digital art. And if digital art is going to develop as an art form, then experimentation and collaboration is absolutely key. And that's what's so wonderful about the space, that it is this creative R&D lab where artists can experiment. And we're fostering some amazing collaborations too to help bridge that gap between art and tech and bring those two worlds much closer together. So we are very interested in the theme of today's discussion because it's something we think about on a day-to-day basis, how to find the best artists practicing on the internet to commission brilliant work and help audiences find and engage with it too. The web is only 25 years old, and as a platform for creative endeavour, it is still, I suppose, in comparison to, say, visual art, literature, theatre and film, it's still a very young medium, and we're thrilled to be supporting artists to explore the creative possibilities of using digital as an environment to experiment and explore. But we are also urging artists to think higher, to be bolder, and to think bigger in pushing boundaries, to think and create beyond anything we can imagine. This is not simply about live streaming or using any other well-worn technological initiatives. We can do this already. This is truly about pushing boundaries and finding and clearing out new and uncharted territories of the arts. And I think it's an ambition that we should all aspire to for the sake of increasing access and widening participation to the arts to all. So the space will be commissioning around 50 projects a year from all creative backgrounds and industries, and we hope to make the space one of the most exciting places on the internet for artists to create and for audiences to explore, to express and to enjoy. One of the greatest things about the space is the open call. This is a place where any artist from anywhere in the world can pitch an idea very easily online. And we're looking for artists, again, with bold, ambitious ideas that people can experience on the internet. I can't share any more detail with you now, but we will be launching our next open call next month, as well as announcing the winners from our first open call too. So please make sure you follow us on Twitter at The Space Arts and sign up to our newsletter as well, and don't miss out on the opportunity to apply to the open call.
Thank you very much. I guess one of the most marked things about the web is the opportunity to reinvent yourself, whether that's through a virtual self or an avatar. And we do this on a kind of micro level every day through blogging or everything we repost and retweet. So a question to all the panel, but particularly Katherine to start with. In view of what you did on the dinner party in terms of addressing stereotypes and those different and multiple identities, could you just talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, the performance that I did at the Purcell Room, it was called The Dinner Party Revisited, and that was because I'd done it before in 2011, but on a far smaller scale and a very, very reduced budget. So what happened at the Purcell Room was, well, and the other venue was, the dinner guests were existing as talking heads inside 8 monitors on television screens at the table, audience facing. And so those 6 monitors were sort of characters that I created, all played by myself, but they were sort of exploiting different personas and relationships towards disability, or the sort of things that you may encounter, of which I have an archive of inside my brain to sort of fall back on. I think the point is that so you had these 6 guests that were at the dinner party at the Purcell Room, and simultaneously they were also at the dinner party at the other venue in Toynbee Studios. And the technology that was used was called bright sign boxes. And the idea is, as one of the guests were activated, switched on and appeared on the screen, so that this happens at the other venue, at the other second performance. So in effect, you've got, as I said, you've got 2 things happening simultaneously. I mean, there were a few problems, in so much as there was, I think, a 20-second delay. But because my work is deliberately meant to be chaotic, awkward, and not slick, that worked for me. And so I guess it was a way to present more people within the performance, but also using technology to do that. I mean, I think that in terms of, I think the biggest, the most technological part of it for me on the advancement was that the idea of turning a monitor on in one venue and then exactly the same thing happening at the other venue. So they were linked together. And I mean, maybe for some that's old technology, but I certainly had never heard of it. And so it just meant that, the potential is infinite. And then there was the other element in which I physically cannot be present in 2 different venues. So to overcome that, what we did was we commissioned some artists to make an inflatable effigy of me. And that was a challenge in itself, because they never had a brief to create somebody in a wheelchair. And so that was interesting, and I think a first. And so what they did is they did just that. And so my effigy was at the second venue, and then my face, everything that was happening at the Purcell Room. So I think it was like a little iPod that was videoing my face and picking up audio that was then taken, transmitted onto the effigy in the second venue. So, this was for me, this was all about experimentation and seeing how far one can push the live art element, because I think it's all very well us seeing a live projection of a performance, but to actually have the feel of that live art element happening. So it wasn't just reliant on the technology. There was also 2 butlers, one butler at the Purcell Room, one butler at the other venue, and there was 2 other performers, and then the same dinner guests. And so that's for me, it's all about how do you maintain that sort of element of liveness, but without physically being there. And I think that I managed to do it, because everything that happened the formula for the piece was replicated, sort of replicated from the Purcell Room. So whatever happened at the Purcell Room activated what was going on in the second venue, Toynbee Studios. So there were 2 live performances happening, and yeah, I think that's enough.
One broad final question, and I'll open up to some questions from the audience. Ruth and Rachel, to get an idea of how integrated and kind of integral the web is to your practice, would you be an artist today if it wasn't for the web and digital technology?
Do you want to take this one first?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I certainly wouldn't be the artist.
That you are today.
The web has really, the existence of the web and then my life in the web and connections with all the very many people that we have had the good fortune to work with have completely changed me and the way I look at the world. So maybe, but it would be very different.
I think I would still be an artist, but I can't imagine making a career out of it. I've got to say, I think I'm really driven in. I'm really fascinated with how things work generally. As in, I think actually, if my path went slightly differently, I would go down the engineering route. And part of what's really exciting for me right now is the fact that if I make an art and how I can distribute it to people, how people interact with it, the question and the discussions that are surrounding that become far more interesting to me on some level than the artwork itself. It's very much kind of a step process where that is just as rewarding. I'm also really fascinated with what people buy into. I'm convinced, and this is from actually, do you know Tim Hunken? You come across Tim Hunken. He makes these amazing kind of sculptural objects which are actually arcade machines, and if you ever get a chance to go and visit the Southwold Pier, I recommend it. And I was on a panel with him last year, and he was discussing the fact that when he put the 20p arcade kind of mechanism where you have to put the 20p in, people interacted with the artwork completely differently. He said before that people were just pressing buttons and they weren't following the instructions, and as soon as they invested that 20p, they read every single instruction and experienced it exactly how he wanted it. And that really, really struck me. And I'm kind of fascinated with how people might buy digital artwork. And I have no hesitation about this being commercial or me selling out or whatever. I think that's a weak argument. I think what's really interesting is if I can get people to invest with their wallets, actually that means a certain engagement that I really long for, I guess. So if they're willing to have an object that I've created that's a digital artwork that isn't functional, doesn't make them coffee, doesn't do anything, but they choose to buy this and to have it in their home, I think that for me as an artist is like the absolute... that would be fantastic. So I think without the web, I can't imagine that happening, and I can't imagine me being continuously interested in new things. And yeah, so I think I don't think I can imagine being an artist forever, because I feel like the web gives me new stimulus all the time, and I feel like I need that.
So let's open it up to the audience. Are there any questions for the panel?
Allowing for greater democracy, I suppose, is one way of putting it, openness to artists, not audiences and not buyers. I mean, artists, for instance. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was already loud enough. Hello. Okay. So, as a lover of art, I'm itching always for finding new artists and discovering creative people around the world. And yes, web does help, but it would be great to have easier access to all of them, is very plainly putting it. So I wonder whether you can see in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, that the web will do that. There won't be any elitism anymore, so it's not like Brit art. There is no... Everyone is equally available to be consumed or admired or loved by us audiences. So.
I think this is coming to you, Ruth.
Okay, I'm going to respond to that. The image that I showed was an image that of the network was an image that I now regard as quite utopian, because it was an image where everything was connected. The net, I first encountered the net as something that was essentially going to be very democratizing, that allowed us to... some of the first things we did, we were able to connect with curators at the Whitney Museum and put them alongside people who we'd met just next door. So it was this very kind of flattening thing. But what's happened on the internet, inevitably, actually now I understand, is that it starts to mirror and echo the power structures that are in the wider world and amplify those. And actually, so whereas it has this mechanism as demonstrated by the production and sharing of free and open source software, which is what most of the web runs off, there is now quite a strong scissor action going on where we see a closing down of the net, either through regulation or and very often it's just about the power of who has influence over regulation and who has the money to invest. So we see commercial and state regulation and investment really reversing some of those kind of more opening out influences.
So you're saying that the future will be looking like the world we know on the ground, as opposed to opening up, being virtual and being new to, you know.
I think I think if we look at, I think that's what we see. Yeah.
That's it. There's no more.
Well,
Utopia will never come to life, you think?
I don't think it will come to life on the web if it isn't coming to life. I don't think we can separate. You know, it's a system infrastructure that's built by human beings. If we don't manage it in real life, we're not going to manage it there. But it does give us, you know, we have different kinds of leverage in web space than we do in physical space. So maybe we just need to make a pact now. Let's all do it. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Another question.
Hi there. I'm a digital computational artist myself, and I've kind of see that this kind of practice has been around for actually quite a long time. Why don't you think this has been picked up by the mainstream art world at all, really? And why do you think it's only been kind of picked up by institutions like the Southbank kind of more recently, as you see these kind of projects in the Barbican and V&A?
It's hard to sell. That's it.
I know it's hard to sell, but we can always have funding from different bodies and things like that.
In terms of how it didn't enter the mainstream, I think that's because it was hard to sell. It's hard to sell to the collectors.
It's hard to sell to the collectors, and it's really unruly. So especially in the kind of early, in a lot of the kind of early artists taking a hold of this medium, you see really quite strong action to subvert power, to subvert institutions, and it's kind of counter to. I mean, I think some of our kind of mainstream art worlds are some of the most conservative, actually, of our culture. So I think it's probably not that surprising. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 5 years, though, because we do see. I mean, with organisations like the Space coming in, a kind of massive institutional investment, and what I hope will happen is that we'll keep some of that unruliness, because it's really important, because it's what keeps it live and what keeps it meaningful and important.
Yeah, I was going to just say as well, I think you're right in that the arts and culture sector has been one of those, I suppose, industries that has been disrupted least by the digital revolution. I think it's yet to come. And I think one of the challenges is often getting real ambition and quality in terms of artistic practice with digital elements in it, and to get that senior level buy-in as well, because we just don't know what it's going to look like yet. And I think it's about creating the kind of environment where we can allow artists to experiment and take risks, because not everything's going to work, but that's okay, you know, because we are on this journey to find out.
No, I do agree with that, but I do think it's been around for quite a while at the same time, where you do have kind of those kind of ideas in place already.
I'd like to connect up something that Sandeep's just said and something that Kaz was saying, which is that, Kaz, you were saying that your performances are often quite chaotic, and your description of these kind of dual-sided things where the technology, you might have a 20-second lag. I think that one of the other things that we struggle with a bit is that in some of the digital industries, like the producers of multi-million-pound special effects and visual effects, we see such a kind of smooth, slick idea of what technology is as a kind of magic thing. And we don't want to see it, and we mustn't know what the technology is doing. It just needs to look like something we don't understand. And very often, in my view, some of the most important and interesting artworks are kind of revealing the messiness and the breakdown and what's happening in the cracks of this stuff. And I just don't think we've got quite used to handling what that kind of breakdown looks like, and where the kind of philosophical and poetic expressions are happening.
Well, let's since you mentioned Katherine, what's the genesis for the chaotic element in your work? I mean, is that a stylistic choice, or is that something that you think is integral to what you need to say?
Well, I like things. I don't like things to be too restrictive, And so, I mean, this, as I said, was the first time I'd used technology at this level where I integrated technology into a live art piece. So when I say live art, I really do mean live art. So, for example, I am not from a theatre background. I'm from a fine art background. And the live art element was about creating a formula in which people would respond to the situation surrounding them. So, for example, the props were real, the food was real, the alcohol was real. So you imagine integrating vast copious amounts of champagne and Prosecco mixed up with technology, televisions. Often they weren't always working, sometimes they went green, and that character, and so I just improvised. But that's what I like to improvise, and I think that, you know, a lot of artists are, you know, have a phobia towards technology because they can't imagine that if it goes wrong, if it fails, which of course it's most likely to fail, then how they do. But I kept saying to the people at the Southbank, and you know, I don't care if it fails. The more it fails, the better. And I actually simulated a cutter. I actually created a breakdown where everything on stage went off. I mean, that was sort of deliberate, but I wanted to also play around with technology and how, you know, sometimes we become so dependent upon it, and yet it is possible to use it in a creative way. I mean, I am not, you know, by any means a technical expert, but I just knew what was possible, having, you know, spoken to different people, and I wanted to play with that as I played with every element within that physical performance space.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
I feel, speaking as a non-artist, there's a danger of wanting the internet to define the idea instead of wanting the idea to define the internet, where we lose the spiritual dimension in the process. The question is, do you feel Malevich, one of the founding fathers of totalitarianism, which included spirituality, and one of the original thinkers of the 20th century, do you think what's emerging from his show, that there's potential through him, through what's emerging, to re-examine the roots of totalitarianism, and but through this a way of building a spiritual component, and through this to deal with the internet at an ideas level rather than more superficially allowing it to operate unthinkingly to define itself for our use? Do you get the sort of flow of my thought?
Who would like to jump in on that question?
I can if you want. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting and so important that artists and thinkers get involved. I think part of the work that companies like Raspberry Pi do is teaching computing education, and that involves learning how to code. We don't yet have a syllabus that's saying why we should make these things, what the impacts are, what they are for people, how they affect other people, how our activity online will affect us in future and other people in future. I think those are discussions we should be having as well, and that's actually the human and spiritual element for me. I think is actually reasons why we do these things, in the same way as we've all seen the abusive stuff that's happening on social media and how we kind of get the very top level of that. We had the recent kind of nudes being leaked because of Apple, this, that and the other, and you have huge repercussions from that on social networks of people commenting, and I suppose we have a flattened down system in that everyone can comment now. What we haven't done yet is have proper discussions as to how that impacts an individual, how that actually impacts people, and how organisations and even governments react. I don't know if everyone paid attention to the Mozilla thing that happened last year, which was their CEO, that it was found that he had donated money to the campaign against was it? I can't remember the name of the action in America.
Prop 28.
Yes. So that was Proposition 28 was against gay rights, as well as things like actually incest and various other kind of rights within America. And he had been found to give money to the campaign against this going through. Now, this was public knowledge several years ago. The company knew. However, someone had found out and had published it on Twitter, and had basically, it ended up being kind of a whirlwind of Twitter madness, which anyone on Twitter will know and recognise, that he should be out, basically. And actually, this wasn't a problem within the organisation. Initially, there was plenty of people within the company who said this isn't a problem. He has never, within the company, expressed any of these views. He's never forced anything upon anyone, blah, blah, blah. But Twitter had kind of taken this and gone with this. And eventually I don't know if he stood down or whether he was made to stand down. And this has happened several times in the last couple of years. And I think these are things we need to start discussing, because it ends up being where the media of many, not just a newspaper, not Murdoch, who's decided that someone's out, but actually a whole set of people who don't have all the information, are able to shout loud enough to impact on an individual or a group, where they perhaps don't get their say back. And that power we haven't quite discussed yet. And that mob mentality we haven't quite discussed yet. And those are the things we need to start thinking about, because the responsibility of that is in the same as any other community in lynch mobbing anybody. Just because it's online does not make it less of a lynch mob. And in terms of that particular example, I don't know all the facts, so I don't want to comment on it. But plenty of people did, and the repercussions of that were physical, not digital. So yeah. So I don't know if that really answered the question. Yes, it's something we should be thinking about. Yes, it's really important. Yes, we're not talking about it enough yet. I hope so. I presume so. I think this is the beginning.
Make a very quick response.
Please do.
I think one of the most pressing needs in the contemporary world at the moment is to have more diverse people involved in negotiating the relationship between collective and individual need, and spirituality and human experience is part of that. And I think that the web as both a way of thinking about the relationship between each other, between individuals, organisations and society, and the kind of physical utility of it and the things that it allows us to see and know about ourselves are really kind of key to that. So I think yes is a safe answer to your question.
I think we have time just for one more very brief question.
Yeah, this may be an extra question, but how can you stop capitalism ruining the roost? Because they have to sell things, they make things, and it's global. That's capitalism. How can you prevent the abuse of capitalism sort of adhering to your ideals of what I've just heard? And they are grand ideas, but will it work? Can you capture them? I don't think so.
A very brief artistic response to the dangers of capitalism.
Me again? Okay. So I think what's interesting now is things are low cost enough for you to supplement it in other ways. I think the web opens up the ability to support yourself through all kinds of different means that weren't possible before. So when before I was limited to where I had to work in my local town, for example, that no longer exists. I can work wherever I want on the web, which means I can make my income in all kinds of different ways, which means now I have disposable income that I can choose to spend in different ways. I'm often a freelancer. I had a couple of years as a freelancer, more than a couple of years, and that meant that I wasn't attached to anyone politically, which means I could pretty much spend my money how I like, and I could talk publicly in whichever way I'd like. That means I can spend money, and it's reasonably low cost to do most of these things now, to have a platform saying whatever I want. And I think that's... I misunderstand the question then, in terms of if you're saying how do we how do we push our views and push these ideas forward without capitalist support? Was that the question, or was it?
Sort of, yeah.
I mean,
they make money
yeah.
for the countries, the governments, and if you like, wage wars, which is going on in the Middle East right now.
I'd just like to restate my answer to the very first question. We don't fix it on the web without fixing it in the world more generally. I think certain things, there are new kind of political philosophies coming out alongside some of these new processes for like cryptocurrencies, and there's the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is doing some really important work that brings together thinkers, political philosophers and economists, which is looking at new ways both to control the value of new products and new software, and think about protecting protecting the use of these things for uses that have a shared common good and a recognised common good. And there's work being done on it, but there isn't a simple answer to that question, I don't think.
I'm thinking in terms of younger people, say between 12 and 16.
Pay attention. I mean, just like, I just think everyone needs to really pay attention to how power moves through these spaces.
Everyone, right, okay.
Yeah.
I guess the final thing to say is that because we're programming this festival collaboratively, if there's anything that we haven't covered in this session, or indeed anything that you've seen across the weekend that you would like to see developed more in the second weekend in November or the third weekend in May, then please just approach one of the Southbank Centre team or someone in the glass box downstairs. So all of this can be fed into the programme as it develops. So thank you very much to the panel, Katherine Araniello, Rayns, Ruth Catlow and Sandeep Mahal, and thanks to all of you as well. Thanks ever so much.